do consider speeding up with settings to consume this content in a fraction of the time. Newbie Dice Podcast.
Hi everyone, I'm Luke.
I'm Jeff Traish.
I'm Adam Ballard.
And I'm Paige, and welcome to the 6th episode of the Newbie Dice Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about list building, level up, building up more powerful lists, I would say, to fight in the current meta. Firstly, we have a new joiner of the podcast. So we have Luke, and he has stepped up last minute. So thank you so much. Luke, please tell us about your gamer origin story.
Typical boring gamer origin for Kings of War. Refugee of the old world. Took a bit of a hiatus after that, and then found local players for Kings of War. Jumped into that. Yeah, fantasy from late 90s. A little bit of 40k sprinkled in there. D&D, all the nerd stuff, and then now, Kings of War and Firefight.
Yeah, Firefight. And you have been doing a lot of 3D printing, am I right?
Yeah, there has been a lot of that going on, but I'm starting to taper that back a little bit, using it more now for, terrain bits or extra bits like that. I have all Mantic Firefight armies that I'm getting through for Enforcers, Marauders, Beermen, and apparently now Forge Fathers, since I got those crazy boxes and I have an overflow of Forge Father models, and also working on my Australian slow grow all Mantic army Northern Alliance.
We were just chatting on the Countercharge After Dark Discord about the crazy boxes, and we were like, nah, we don't like the randomness. We might get crap. And then one person was saying, Luke is bound to get them. And then he came online and said, look, guys, I got 2 crazy boxes and have everything I need.
Well, two of each, 2 sci-fi and 2 fantasy. So I've been digging through trying to figure out what all the sci-fi bits are, because I don't know what half of them are. So that's a bit fun.
The Northern Alliance army will be your first full Mantic army, huh?
Yeah, first all Mantic, although I do have some cool giant models and some other things from other manufacturers that I'll add into the mix as I go. But yeah, just working on that core of that two mega armies worth of Northern Alliance finally assembled. So just working on that.
Awesome. How many other armies do you have?
I've got Undead, which is probably a half Mantic. I've got Dwarves, which is all my leftovers from Warhammer days. Yeah. Forces of Nature, Forces of the Abyss, Ogres, Salamanders.
That's quite a bit. That's
it, yeah.
Impressive. And you were just on Countercharge Podcast as a new player, just not too far back. And now you've amassed a huge collection.
About just under a couple of years ago, I think, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Luke. So we'll move on to Jeff. And everybody knows Jeff. Australian. Are you still holding on to the Masters title?
No, Ken Ferris got the Masters title. So they included paint and that this time, and I took a couple of individuals that I hadn't based. I just grabbed them out of a box. I thought, oh yeah, they'll do. And they didn't have some basing. I lost 8 points for it.
Yeah, you were tied for first place based on battle alone. I remember that.
Look, he had me on attrition points anyway, so even without that, he would have won it. So I've got no dramas about him winning it. He deserved the win.
But Jeff, once a master, always a master. It's just like presidents. You hold on to that title until you die.
That's right.
You hold on to multiple of those titles. I think you won 3 times.
Yeah, that's just the start. With all these new players coming through like Luke, it's going to be harder and harder to win.
And both Ken and yourself flew to the Pilgrimage GT in US.
Yeah, Marcelo Rocco brought us over, hosted us, and we had a fantastic time. Got to have a look around Philadelphia. Met lots of players that I've only known on UB. The funny thing was at the tournament, I knew 5 of the players from playing them previously. I played 4 of them in the tournament out of my 5 games. So that was, out of about 40 odd people, that was rather strange, but it was good catching up with them, and really friendly, great hosts, really enjoyed the trip. The travel was a bit much, but the trip over there was fantastic.
And yeah, I was telling Steve Foster, like, you would like to play against Jeff. If you don't get matched up against him, maybe you could arrange a game against him separately, and then he got to play you in the tournament.
Yes, yeah, I think I played Steve round 2. I think it was. Yeah.
He said you're his only loss.
I had a little bit of luck go my way in that game. So,
Yeah, so thank you very much. So let's move to Adam. What have you been up to? Since you have last came on, you have started a YouTube channel called Master Site. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, appreciate it. Battle reports is something that I've always wanted to get into, and I just finally pulled the trigger. Something that I've been looking for out of battle reports is battle reports honed in around tournament play, tournament practice, and whatnot. So that's where I've decided to jump in at. So every tournament that I go to, I'm going to be doing a report of each of my games. While we're recording this, I'm in the middle of my Adepticon videos. So by the time this drops, I'm sure I should have all of them out. It's been a lot of fun, especially going back and just kind of diving in. I notice little things about my own gameplay and even some about my opponents that pick up some tricks to use for future games. I've really been enjoying it and have gotten quite a bit of feedback. So it sounds like the community likes it as well at this point.
Awesome. You just went to Adepticon where you played all 3 games, Armada, Firefight, Kings of War, and you placed well in Armada and Firefight too, no?
Yep. Yeah, so Armada and Firefight, I was undefeated in both those. I didn't have to play the other undefeated person who took first, which was Travis Tim, my clubmate. And then Travis, continued that winning record into Kings of War and took down the 5 games overall championship. But unfortunately, I couldn't keep up with my second place run, so I went 3-2 in the in Adepticlash there. So, but I had a lot of good games, and definitely learned that my Night Stalkers are an army that I can't just pick up and play anytime. I definitely was rusty with them. So.
I see. So what armies are you looking to play next?
Well, I'm just kind of cycling through the ones that I currently own. I have clubmates that let me borrow anything that they have, but my next major event is Lone Wolf. It's in 3 weeks' time, actually. So right around the corner here, and I'm leaning towards my Empire Dust for that event. We'll see exactly what lists, variation of the list I come up with for that event, but that's what I'm looking at right now.
Congratulations, Travis, for taking home all 3 awards of Armada, Firefight, and Kings of War. That's no easy feat.
And he finished second in the team tournament, was also undefeated in that one, but lost because of a tiebreaker.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. So he was undefeated in 4 tournaments for the whole weekend.
I'm not sure if you heard Travis on our Goblins Army Review podcast, but he said last year that he couldn't make it to the Masters because of his newborn. And he said the only reason Adam won because I wasn't there.
It's more likely true than not, honestly. There's definitely an asterisk next to my victory in Seattle, and that is because Travis was not in attendance. So,
right. Well, congrats.
But I'll take what I can get.
You take what you can. All right. So lastly is myself. I've actually been tinkering with coming up with my own minis board / skirmish game. So I always wanted to have a skirmish game that finishes comfortably within an hour. And I don't feel there's one on the market. And yeah, even like Firefight, it takes more than an hour. Dead Zone, maybe less than an hour. So Dead Zone is probably my favorite Mantic game other than Kings of War. Just that locally, not a lot of people are playing it. So with that, I always wanted to create my own game. So I've been tinkering around with it. It's currently on version 0.4. And I'm working on goblins for my army this year. Looking at how things are going, it'll probably bleed into the next year because 120 goblins to paint just for the 4 hordes of rebel. That's a lot to paint. All right. So with that, let's move on to the topic of our podcast. Okay, so we'd like to talk about conventional list building. Now, most experienced players, when you build a list, you probably have these pointers in mind, right? You'll probably have 2 to 3 inspiring sources, usually 3, and then maybe if you don't need, you can drop it, lower it to 2, but usually 3, 1 in the center, 1 on the left, and 1 on the right. Of course, barring some factions tend to have easy access to inspiring, such as Basileia. That would be an exception. Then you will probably have 4 to 6 big units. These are hordes that cost more than 200 points, your siege breakers, your large infantry, combat hordes, and whatnot. They happen, for most armies, they happen to be your hammer and they are your anvil as well, because these units tend to have defense 5 and 15, 17 nerf or something like that. Not all armies have access to like pure anvils. And then you say, yep, we'll have 3 to 5 chaff. These numbers are for like a 2300 point list, right? And then you put in some support units. You either have heal, you might have Bane Chant, you have some flanking units, and you have some shooting units. And then you put it into the pot, and then you add some flavor to taste, and that is your list. If your list follows this formula, it's probably going to do fairly well. Just recently, Adam, I was looking at your video, the first video versus the new undead player. You were commenting on his list. It's like, yep, it follows this formula. It's not a bad list, right?
No, absolutely. I think it follows this formula pretty much to a T. Just exactly three inspiring, 6. I think it was 6. Yeah, 6 or 7 big units, 3 chaff pieces, support with Bane Chant and Surging, and there's really not much shooting that you can get out of undead. So, yeah, it's very, very focused on the strengths of the army and absolutely follows this.
If a new player came up to you and say, hey, how do I build a proper list? Is this probably the backbone that you would ask them to build their list around, Jeff?
I'm a little bit different in my list building. Yeah, I tend to not go so many 200 plus point units. It depends on the army, but some you need to use the 200 plus. Other armies you don't need to. So that'd be the biggest difference. Chaff, I probably take less chaff, and I try and look at some of my heroes, etc., especially if they're scoring units, to do both jobs, to chaff and to inspire. So I like things that can do more than one thing. Yeah, and just the flavor to taste. Yeah, I do lots of that. I love coming out with new ideas and trying different things out. That's what I enjoy. But yeah, that'll be the biggest difference. I like these days. I'm liking lists with more than 3 inspiring units.
Yeah,
I'm looking at 4 plus in most of my armies now.
that's interesting. We'll look into that later on. Luke, what about yourself?
Yeah, as you said, for a newer player, this is a good run sheet, because I think the way that we now tend to build lists kind of diverges a little bit from this. So what we would do, maybe like Jeff's saying, is not necessarily the advice we'd give to someone new coming in. Like the chaff, for example, to me, everything's chaff in a pinch, right? So I think about units that maybe are screening units that I guess you could class as chaff, but generally it's more like, utility throwaway units. So something that can hold an objective over there if it needs to. It's not so many points that you need to commit it to combat to get effect out of it. It's a cheap unit, so it can be thrown away as chaff. It can be put on an objective. It can be run as a screen or as a flanker or that sort of thing. So, I don't really think sort of in this real recipe way anymore. And like Jeff, if I'm playing an army that has lots of nimble square base characters, I'll tend to try and take lots of those if I can, and spread out more inspiring. I did quite well with ogres last year with 6 or 7 inspiring units,
as did many people do with ogres quite well.
Yeah and that's actually the last time I was playing 2300, and that's why we're not going to see any ogre lists from me, because they did get a little bit of a nerf since I last played them at 2300. So it's not quite relevant to how I build it now anyway.
You mean you can't spam siege breakers anymore?
Well, you still can. It's totally viable. You just can't really give them the anti-waiver stuff that you used to. And Nom is a very considered choice now. He's
Right.
not an auto include.
I'd probably say that this conventional list is absolutely for beginners. Like, this is what you want to think of when building lists. I think that when we try to get people in and begin playing, a lot of players focus on the kill aspect of the game. You want to be able to combat your opponent and to win those engagements. And I think for me personally, my list building thought process has revolved more around scenario play as I've played more kings. So definitely want to be able to engage and win combats, but if I'm able to win scenarios and not win combats, I'll take the scenario win over the combat. So
Yeah, definitely. This is for someone getting the hang of the game, starting to get some success. You probably see them build towards this formula. And I think even in tournaments now, you still see a lot of lists and players following these formulas.
Yeah, there's plenty out there.
So, I forgot about this. So they all end up about 13. This is for 2,300 points. So 13 to 16 units, 21 to 26 unit strength. So as we move on, I'll be uploading this podcast on my YouTube channel as a video, as well as audio format on the podcast. So on the video, you'll be able to see us going through the lists on the screen, which I find easier, but we'll try to help people follow along if you are just tuning in on audio only. So for myself, I'm just going to put a prime example of that list building philosophy. And I've been playing Order of the Green Lady for pretty much 3 years, since early 3rd edition. So of course, my list has went through several iterations since then, but it has always been just small deviations here and there. So over the years, I've placed pretty well in Call to Arms Season 4. I got 10th place of a variation of this list. And at quintessentially Quail Cup, the first season, I came in 2nd place, losing to Tom Robinson. And yeah, so just a quick example. 1 regiment and horde of Earth Elementals, 1 regiment of Order of the Brotherhood with Banner of the Green Lady, 1 regiment of Order of Redemption, 2 hordes of Order of the Forsaken, 1 with Boots of Striding, 1 with Pipes of Terror, 2 Flying Beasts of Nature with 7 attacks, 2 Pegasus, a Druid with Conjurer's Staff, Heal, Bane, Chant, Surge, Avatar of the Green Lady, and a Unicorn with Talk of Dissonance. 13 units, 21 unit strength for 2,300 point list, but only 10 of them score. We have 5 big units, as you can see here, a horde of Earth Elementals, 2 flavors of Cavalry regiments, 2 Forsaken hordes, and I have a thick chaff in the Earth Elemental regiment, and then chaff in 2 Pegasus. The Unicorn is my support unit, and I often use it as chaff as well. I charge it in to hold something in place. So support units, I have 2 spellcasters, Druid and Avatar of the Green Lady, as well as 2 flanking units, which will be the Flying Beasts of Nature. So yeah, I've been finding success, but over the years, I find it more and more difficult to find success with this list, because if this is the conventional list out there, everyone is building to be able to win the conventional list, right? So over the years, I've changed. I used to run Water Elementals, which I find is easy for people to take down. So I swap them for Earth Elementals. So defense 6 makes it a little bit tougher, because everything else, if you can take everything else down in my army, you can take down the Water Elementals. So the Earth Elementals are there to provide a problem. And most games, a lot of my other things are dead, but the Earth Elementals are standing. Yeah, I used to run some Heart Piercers as well, up to 2 regiments. And then since then, I've removed them. Since the resurgence of elven shooting, I've ran a horde of Men-at-Arms before. Yep, so this is the list. A little bit low on unit strength, and most importantly, 3 of them are individual, so only 10 of them score, which I do feel the pinch. So the purpose of this list is to outspeed and outflank the opponent. And if that fails, the list will crumble. So with that, we'll look into some of our hosts' lists to discuss their list building philosophy. So the first thing I'm very curious about is Jeff's Basileia list, which ran 3 men-at-arms hordes. So I was like, what? What's this man-at-arms horde all about? And of course, the Elohai have this special rule right now. I think it's Divine Fervor, where if it's in combat with humans, the humans get elite.
Yep.
Further down, I guess I should read down this list for the listeners out there. 3 hordes of men-at-arms. One of them has the Hammer of Measured Force. Okay, 3 regiments of Elohai. All of them have defense 4 in exchange for crushing 2. 2 regiments of knights. 2 baby phoenixes. 2 dictators. And the most interesting thing is I thought you would take Iron Discipline, but you did not take that upgrade. That is the upgrade that you whip your units for D3 damage and they get vicious. I thought that you combo the elite from the Elohai with the vicious from the dictator, and then you have a Ogre Palace Guard captain with a Blade of Slashing. Overall, 13 units at 27 unit strength for a 1995 points, which is high. So my first question, why did you not take the Iron Discipline?
I dislike things that hurt your own army, for starters. And I really didn't think on a unit like Men-at-Arms Swordsman that it was that valuable. They're getting 12 hits on average. So 2 of those are ones that you re-roll. You're probably going to do more damage to yourself than you are to them. And you're paying for it. Not something that I thought was a great idea. So that's why I left that out. I love the dictators, and no one could figure out why I was taking them. But having Mighty, Duelist, Inspiring, 12-14 Nerve, Crushing 2, I thought they were brilliant for 75 points. So that was something I'd definitely take again. I probably wouldn't run the list again. When I looked at it again, when you'd put it up, I thought, geez, it's a bit of a strange one. But I know the idea behind it was to run the hordes in front. They're cheap enough and they have that high unit strength. So great for scenario play. And then the Elohai could look over the top of them. And when units hit the hordes, I can then come in and flank them with the Crushing 2 from the Elohai, plus get the elite as well. So that was the general plan behind the main part of the list. The Phoenixes, I love. I think they're great, more for the shooting than the healing. I just, because they can shoot over everything, shoot over a hill, can't hide behind things. If you're having a shooting contest with something, you'll win 9 times out of 10 against archers and things like that. As long as you play it smartly and just, take some of the damage and, you just wither them down. The knights, well, they're knights, but that was the idea behind it. It's sort of worked, but I wouldn't run the Elohai with the defense 4 Crushing 2 anymore. I think keeping them alive is more important. Right. So that's one thing I'd change straight away.
Do you run the knights behind the hordes or in between the hordes?
Again, it would depend on what I was facing and how that would be one of the last things that I'd put down. So I'd like to pressure one flank normally, but sometimes, I'd run them in between them as well, because you can use them with the Elohai as well in combination. There's a lot of combining things together. I wouldn't say it's a great list, but it worked for, very good against shooting lists, because you do have the heal, you do have the Iron Resolve. Everything's cheap enough. There's nothing there. The most expensive unit I've got is 205 points. So I wouldn't recommend it, but it went okay.
I think this will be your 3 hordes of men-at-arms, and then the 3 Elohai will be behind.
Yes, normally that's how it would work.
So at any point, anything charges you, at least one will get a flank, right?
That's right, yeah. Used to do a similar thing with Night Stalkers.
I see Adam smiling over there.
Yeah. So they were very good for sitting behind the hordes of scarecrows and then coming in.
And the scarecrows are cheaper. This is men-at-arms. You're paying a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
but they take a hit a lot better,
type
right?
of idea, but
They take it a lot better.
Yeah.
They have one higher nerf, and
Defense
they have
4
iron
higher nerf.
resolve.
Defense 4.
Defense
Yeah.
4.
yeah.
And the dictators, I think, were actually, great choice. Odd for you, Jeff. But a great choice. You know, particularly with the 4 attacks and the crush 2 on the melee 3, their ability to sit down a flyer is so much better than, you know, the 3 attack heroes that you're generally taking for the inspiring and the sit down ability. Like, I've lost count of how many times I've relied on those 3 attacks to sit down something, and it just hasn't
just
managed
fails.
to do it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
particularly
The
'cause they
trouble
don't have
is the
mighty.
speed 5.
Oh, they do have mighty.
Yeah, and they have no mount option, if I'm not wrong.
No, they don't have a mount option.
Yeah.
So, but then you've got the Elahai to do that. So,
I think I forgot to mention this earlier. It was
Yeah.
in the Australian Masters in December 2022. You were tied for first place based on battle points.
yeah. So obviously it did work. Yeah, it did work, but it's probably not something that I'd take again like that anyway.
Would you take Hordes of Men at Arms again?
Do
Do you think they are decent enough in the current meta?
I don't know that they're great value. There's better value units out there in Hordes.
Yeah,
As Scarecrows are a better value unit than they are.
yeah. So being in Basileia, you don't have access to those hordes, right?
No. Yeah. At the end of the day, you've got to get your unlocks and so forth. So,
Right.
Men at Arms being unit strength 4, I think they're one of the cheapest unit strength 4 units in the game.
Yes.
So they do have that going for them.
True.
Right.
Yeah. The Iron Resolve's a good thing. So it did have its pluses. It was more combining the ones together that makes it come into play.
The shield wall is probably the cheapest one, but I'm not sure how many points is that in a horde. Probably around the 160 to 175 point range. All right, with that, we'll move on to the next list, which is Adam's Masters winning Night Stalkers list, 2,300 points in Masters USA 2022 of July. And since then, this army has been heavily changed, but we'll talk about pre-Big Red Book. This was your list. So it starts off with 4 Scarecrow Hordes as your Traish screens. They were 130 points in the past with 30 attacks. 2 Reaper Troops. They were 20 attacks in the past at 135 points. One of your Reaper Troops has Boots of Striding. And 2 Mind Screechers, 150 points. They were height 5 beforehand. Okay, and 2 Horror Rift Weavers. They had Aura Spell Ward before the Big Red Book. 3 Soul Flayers regiments with no items. They were speed 10 before the Big Red Book change. The Dread Fiend with a Trickster's Wand. And 3 Butcher Flesh Rippers. 17 units that all score and 28 unit strength. Which brings me to my point about these large infantry heroes are pretty popular because they are quite cheaply pointed. They are very nimble, they are scoring units, and they can contribute quite a bit to combat, especially if you get flanks in. So Adam, talk to me more about this list.
So this list was built to win scenarios because all 17 drops are unit strength. So no individuals, no war machines. A true MSU style list, in my opinion. And what I mean by that is everything's a small unit. Nothing's actually worth many points. So there's never going to be a main focus or target for the enemy when it comes to killing something. There are definitely more valuable units depending on scenarios and whatnot, but I'm not afraid to lose anything in this army, and that's just kind of how it played. Is I want to push forward, get to the objectives quickly, sit on them, force the opponent to engage, and then just outnumber the opponent versus outpunch them with horde on horde action. So it did it well, and I played a lot of games with it to really refine it. The units themselves, outside the nimble square bases, those guys were quite forgiving and able to be redeployed, but the Scarecrows, the Reapers, the Soul Flares, they all pretty much needed to be in the place I needed them from the beginning of the game. So, but yeah, it was good enough to win me US Masters. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then I haven't played it since, except for at Adepticon where I tried to take a refined version after all the changes, and it didn't go as well as Masters.
So this has 28 unit strength and all 17 units score. And one of the challenges a conventional list would have against this is that firstly, you have to charge the really cheap scarecrows. They are just 130 points. And when you take them out, you probably need more than one hammer to take it out. And then when you do, it has 11 fighting units that will charge you, some in the front, some in the flank, and they'll take you out. And at that point of time, whatever you have remaining, you're only taking out one unit at a time, and he still has so many pieces left over. And the most expensive unit are the Soul Flayers at 165 points. So everything is 165 points or less. It also doesn't hurt to have Spell Ward bubbles on top of the whole army being stealthy. So that was removed. This is the one gripe I have with Night Stalker armies. They seem to get free Wind Blasts. It's like Wind Blast can be a powerful spell in the right circumstances. So if you were to buy the spell Wind Blast, they tend to cost quite a pretty penny. But you kind of get them as a side dish for the Mind Screech and as a side dish for the Soul Flayers. So it's like they're pretty useful spells, and you don't seem to be paying points for them.
Yeah, Wind Blast has definitely won me games, more than one. So I would agree. And yeah, the reason this army truly worked is that I did not have the hard counter from shooting or lightning bolt spam heavy lists. The stealthy across the board, or a spell ward, and then keeping my key units either behind my lines to get cover or in terrain. Almost all shooting was hitting me on sixes. Almost all lightning bolts or spells were hitting me on sixes. It was just really powerful in that aspect because nothing has a terribly high nerve or is terribly defensive in the army. So since the Aura Spell Ward's gone away, I've definitely noticed that Lightning Bolt is much bigger threat. Also, with the other changes, the biggest one that I didn't realize how big it was the Soul Flayers going down to Speed 8. I thought that Speed 8 was going to be plenty, and there were many times this previous weekend at Adepticon that I was looking, I'm like, well, there's another charge. If I had Speed 10, I would have been in a flank and would be winning the scenario then. But yeah, I think rightfully so. A lot of these units deserved a step down in power, and the army still performs pretty well. I think I was just a little rusty more than anything. So
say that Speed 8 is a big difference, and it's probably a good nerf if you're not going to nerf the combat power of the Soul Flayers, because the simple answer was to reduce its attacks, right? Because it seems to have more attacks than comparable profiles. So yeah, reducing it to Speed 8, it's double, because when you charge, it's only 16 as opposed to 20. And when you're starting behind the Scarecrows, you're another 3-inch back. So that really shortens your effective charge range. Yeah, so I guess the biggest nerf to this build would be the Aura Spell Ward, and the second biggest nerf would be the Soul Flayer's drop in speed. What about the height of the Mind Screechers?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. The Mind Screech height would make a big difference.
For me, the Mind Screech height wasn't an issue.
No.
The Mind Screeches usually ran right up along in the front line for me, because I just had so many units overlooking everything that anybody that charges a Mind Screech, they're going to get flank charge or double charge. And Mind Screech being a 13-15, they're actually quite resilient to most things that could reach out and touch them. So
yeah, just you used to see a lot of lists where they'd run the Scarecrows and then the Mind Screechers being height 5 behind them, shoot over the top without penalty, but you couldn't get at them. And that was a big bugbear with people as well, I think. I didn't really use them that much, but yeah.
Yeah, 5 was the wrong height to put them at in the first place, but, they've corrected that. So
yeah, the
reason I like it so much is it smacks of the Ogre 9x9, except that you've got both speed, the heroes aren't as good as the Ogre equivalents, but you've got height variability and you've got speed variability as well, which is two things that, aside from chariot sergeants, the Ogre list is lacking in. So you can have your nimble punchy heroes hidden behind your height 2 guys and still nimble charge around. So I think it's really solid.
Yeah, it's a good list.
Yeah,
I think beating up on ogres was my favorite part of this list because they were the other big bullies in the last edition. It was Night Stalkers and ogres you always saw, and this list was not kind to ogres.
The Scarecrow hordes are a big thing, right? Where people have to commit a lot of points into it. And this is your Adaptive Clash version, which had all the nerfs in. And one thing I noticed is you had a lot of items. I guess those were from the spare points lying around, especially on the Soul Flayers. One has J-Boots, one has Blessing of the Gods, and the other one has Helm of the Drunken Ram. You took off one Reaper and one Rift Weaver to put a Titan in, Shadowhawk. So just reading it off for the listeners: 4 Scarecrow hordes, 1 Reaper troop, 3 Soul Flayers, 1 with Striding, 1 with Blessing of the Gods, 1 with Helm of the Drunken Ram, 2 Mind Screechers, a Horror Rift Weaver, Shadowhawk, 3 Butcher Flash Rippers with items as well. 1 has the Talk of Dissonance, 1 has Blade of Slashing, and the Dread Fiend has Trickster's Wand.
I definitely don't like this list near as much. If possible, I prefer to not run any magic items. J-Boots in the previous list and the Trickster's Wand were the only 2 I had. And those were quite valuable and had a specific role. But in this one, I'm just throwing items on these Soul Flayers just to fill out points. But yeah, the Scarecrow Hordes lost 5 attacks and dropped 5 points each. The Reaper Troop lost 5 attacks and got dropped 10 points. With those changes, the Reapers in my original build were the one unit that I would change if there was a better option for me. I just never found that better option. For this one, I decided that I just dropped one of them and I needed another monster slot. Otherwise, I would still keep a second Horror Riftweaver if I had the slots. And I picked up that Shadowhawk for some extra big punching.
How did the Shadowhawk fare?
Shadowhawks are great. I mean, it pulled its weight all weekend. So I'm definitely not upset that I took the Shadowhawk. But the list just didn't quite come together like that other one. When you have, 30 points of magic items and the list just comes together, it just feels so much better. So with this one, I think I spent probably 60 or 70 points on magic items that I really didn't want to. I just didn't have anything else to slide in there for a unit. So,
I mean, you could drop some of the items and upgrade the Reapers to another Soul Flayer.
The limitation is he doesn't have a unit ready. He has a limited collection.
That's also true. My Night Stalker army was built specifically for the 17 units that I had in the original build. And it just so happens that one of my friends or club mates, Travis Tim, he has 2 Shadowhawks painted similarly. So I took one of them and used them. So that's why I was able to even make an adjustment at all. So,
right. If models collection wasn't an issue, what would be the direction you would go in this list?
I like troops of phantoms, and I think they actually would fit well in this list. If I drop the Reaper troops, probably go back to the double Horror Riftweavers and drop the items. I probably can squeeze 2 or 3 troops of phantoms in there. That's probably what I would try to do, just to get that speed 10 and that objective focus again. Speed 10 nimble, it's best thing you can do for objective gaming.
Phantoms are quite sturdy.
They are.
All right, we've talked about this list enough. Let's move on to the next list. So this is Jeff's Varangur list. It's 2,000 points and it won first place in Clash of Kings.
Yeah.
January this year.
Yes.
And this was like an all hammers list. So I'll read it off. 3 hordes of snow trolls, each with waiver mitigation items, Staying Stone, Chassis of Wrath, Dwarven Ale, 3 regiments of Mounted Suns with no upgrades, a single Thane, that's your 50-point hero with 3 attack, 2 Thanes on Frost Fangs, and 3 Snow Troll Primes, bringing it to 12 units, 23 unit strength for a 2,000 points list. 11 of them score, only that Thane on foot doesn't score. So Jeff, talk to us about this list.
I thought the hammers in this list are reasonably priced. The Mounted Suns are quite good value. The Snow Trolls fill a similar but different role. They're not quite as hitty, but the number of games you'll play where they'll cop a lot of damage. If they do get wavered, obviously I've got the mitigation there, But other times, if they were in trouble, I could send any of the heroes in to block up the unit that was trying to get to them. So that'd give them a chance to recover with the regen and then regen again when they went back in. So I've had them on 10 or 12 wounds and finished the game with 1 or 2 wounds on them. So it's a good, solid army all round. The lack of healing was probably something that I noticed the most. So shooty armies could be a problem, but the Snow Troll primes were great. I tended to use, this is one of the ones where I'd use the characters as the chaff pieces, but chaff pieces that are very hard to get rid of. So they would go in front and then I'd hit them with all the hammers from behind. So, and it seemed to work. Everyone was wondering about the little Thane, but he is only 50 points and you can still run in and do a wound somewhere and block up a unit when you need it, or add an extra wound here or there. I remember him chasing a mage right around the back of the table in one game, which was really funny. So it was good value just for that.
Jeff's and his exploits of his Speed 5 infantry heroes.
Yeah, well, it was a Speed 5 character as well that I was chasing. So yeah, he was definitely worth his value. Once or twice he killed trombones. Yeah, killed 2 trombones, things like that you just don't think of, but he's there and people don't worry about him and he just runs in and starts doing the business. So he always come in handy. And if he died, who cared?
You usually push the Snow Troll primes forward as chaff?
Yeah, they'd be the first ones more so than the Thanes.
Mm-hmm.
Thanes would be going through the difficult ground, etc. If I can get the charge with them, all the better. But the only thing that's going to take down a Snow Troll prime is a hammer.
Mm-hmm.
Normal unit isn't going to do it. So if you hit it with a hammer, then I hit your hammer with my hammer. That's pretty much the plan, and it does work, you know. And if he survives, he's regenning and adding to the combats. And again, you know, it was a formula that did work.
Snow Troll primes played very similar to the Butcher Flesh Rippers in my Night Stalker list, which I should say that I just blatantly stole those from Jeff's army of Night Stalkers when I played against him. So best ideas come from other people. So
yeah, well, I've picked a few up off you too, Adam. So
I think that Jeff's list really reflects what I was trying to say about my Night Stalkers when it comes to magic items, that that 50-point Thane could easily have been 50 points more of magic items, especially on those Mounted Sons of Korgan. But sometimes just having another unit is more of the value than excess points to help a unit be better at combat, because a lot of times you don't really see that effect or the amount of points you spend on magic items really improve enough to make that unit more effective.
Yeah, they die the same. The other thing is, I think of like a 50-point unit there, it's like having a magic item that just gave you more drops to help out-drop the opponent. So, you know, it's just how you look at it. Yeah, I agree with Adam. It's exactly that.
If you kit out a Thane, for example, if you give it a mount, you give it a bit of items, it could easily be double its points also. So by keeping it cheap, it's a good value unit. Yeah,
you get more in your list, keeping them out. The Snow Trolls were a bit different. They really do suffer from wavering. So it's the one time where I do use items.
Oh, yeah. Required points. The Snow Trolls is really tough for them to come without those items that you put on them. So.
Yeah, having high nerve, high save, and regeneration, you want to make the most of it.
With that, you brought a variation of this list to the Pilgrimage GT, happened in March of 2023. It's a 2,300 point tournament as opposed to 2,000. So I'm going to read off the list. You have 3 regiments of Knight Raider infantry, all of them exchanging throwing axes for bows. And then you have your 3 hordes of Snow Trolls, one of them with Staying Stone, one of them with Chalice of Wrath. You did not have Dwarven Ale on the last unit, probably because of the shortage of points. 2 mounted Sons of Korgan cavalry regiments. 2 Thane heroes. This time you kitted them out. So one has Bane Chant, the Loot of Insatiable Darkness, and the other one has Diadem of Fire Dragonkind, which gives you Fireball 8. 2 Thanes on Frostfangs, one of them with Healing Brew, and 3 Snow Troll Prime Heroes, bringing it to 15 units, 26 unit strength, 2300 points. So what's the decision behind the Night Raiders and the items on the Thanes?
Right. I did run another Varangar list early in the year, last year, which I had quite a number of Draugr in it. And I was talking with Tom Robinson. We were just talking about the Varangar lists, and he was saying he was using the Night Raiders to quite good effect. He was using them with the throwing axes. And so I thought I'll go and have another look at them. I looked at them and I thought, oh, I really like them with the bows. And they were effective in some games, other games not so effective. But their best role was actually in combat. They really catch people out, getting those flank charges, having Pathfinder, getting the Thunderous. So they were a good addition. The Thane hero with the diadem, that was supposed to back up the shooting. So I could then put on the shattering onto units that I'd shot. But that didn't really work. So he would have been one of the first ones I dropped. And the rest is similar to what I used before. Yeah, I'd probably drop one of the Night Raiders and the Diadem guy and throw the third Mounted Sun unit back in there. But it worked very similar, just added some shooting to it and had some great games with it, as I said. Mike
Zettelmeyer,
that's it. Yeah, we had a fantastic game in the last round, which was real to and fro. You know, either of us could have won it. He said, oh, that's it. You just killed the 2 models that my daughter made. So I was in for it. But yeah, we had some really big to and fro things, and I was just able to scrape through there. Yeah, had some great games. So it still worked well in the tournament.
Right. I guess you brought Bane Chan because you have the Night Raiders, so you want to add on.
That was good. Yeah, that on anything. I know I've said to you before, I'm not overly big fan on Bane Chant, but if you get enough attacks, and that's a very cheap version. I've got 75 points on a hero who can go in and fight and can Bane Chant. He's great value. So I just don't like spending a lot of points on something if I can help it. But that one I'd definitely keep in the list.
Right. Yeah. So the Night Raiders on first look, range attack 4+ with 24-inch shooting bows, but it is lacking steady aim.
Yes.
So the moment you move, you hit on 5s or even 6s when there's cover. They don't have a scout also to get into position to shoot first round.
You can pay for that if you want.
Oh, you could? Oh, I see.
Yes, yeah. I think it's 15 points and you get Vicious or something as well. But I'm always trimming points. But yes, that is a downfall compared to the elf type shooting. But when you match them up, elves are getting 12 shots plus elite. And this is their 185 point unit. These guys are getting 12 shots on 4s without elite, but they've got the stealthy. So when you're in a shootout with them, you actually got a slight advantage over them after that first round. You just get up and shoot, and then it didn't quite work out that way in the game, but statistically, yeah, they're quite a good answer to them.
Yeah.
And they hit on 4s, right? So like compared to your normal archer unit, moving up for a turn to get into range, you take the hit to hit on 5s, and it's fine. They're just a normal archer unit. Even moving up into cover, you're going to hit on 6s. But like with my dwarven crossbows, I'll take the half shots on 6s just to get them into position for a turn, and then they're in that cover and can Pathfinder charge out. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so. It's kind of like I think the 4+ is a bonus. You kind of expect to be hitting on 5s normally, but if you're in a forest and happy to camp there for a couple of turns, then hitting on 4s is just gravy.
Yeah. No, they are quite good, but as I said, just depends on what you're up against. Defense 6 is not much fun shooting at, but
true. Here's another list, a greater air elemental list of mine, and it's a perfect example of why people hate this list is because it really bullies the conventional lists out there. So I'll just read my example. Of course, not all greater air elemental lists are built this way. So it is 3 regiments of forest shamblers and 1 horde of forest shamblers, 2 regiments of earth elementals and 2 hordes of earth elementals, 3 greater air elementals, Caris, Glade Walker Druid with its full package, which would be the Ring of Harmony, Crown of the Wizard King, Heal and Search, and a Tree Herder. So that brings it to 14 units and 23 unit strength. One of the most common things you probably would see in the Greater Air Elemental list would be some form of thick chaff in their Earth Elementals or Earth Elemental hordes. So what you're going to do is you're going to crash into its walls ineffectively, and the Greater Air Elemental will move into a flank and surge into you. The Greater Air Elemental has a 20-inch charge range, but if you're doing surge shenanigans, they only move 10. And if they are sitting behind a unit, that 10 inches is really quite short. So if they are aiming to surge into a flank, usually they will require you to charge into their walls first. That is one common misconception that players have. They're not going to fly 20 and surge into your flank, you should realize. A lot of Greater Air Elemental lists, you might find Fire Elemental hordes that would give it more traditional hammer unit, although the Fire Elementals, they hit on 4s, but they are crushing 2 and vicious to keep with the theme of elementals, right? So the druid can double cast off of them, heal or search or whatnot. You might find people playing the Greater Air Elemental formation. With that, it is good, but one thing it does is it exacerbates the problem of this list, which is the Air Elementals are defense 4, and then if you bring 2 hordes of the normal Air Elementals, you're bringing in an extra 2 defense 4 units. One of the main weaknesses of the list is the defense 4 of the Air Elementals. So the build that I have here is trying to counter that with lots of defense 5 and 6. Another variation would be with Scorch Wings, because Scorch Wings are just great, both the regiment and horde options. So that would provide the list with some shooting, but then again, the Scorch Wings are defense 4. So I've tried that before, but against lists that are able to do well against defense 4 units, then they will do well against the Scorch Wings as well. So this is a build of Greater Air Elementals I'm talking about. But essentially, you can see a variety of Forces of Nature players out there. The only essential pieces of this list for Greater Air Elementals would probably be 2 or 3 Greater Air Elementals and the Glade Walker Druid. So if you only bring 2 and the Glade Walker Druid, that comes up to about 520 points. And the remaining parts of the list, you can just do whatever you want with it. You can flavor it to your style. So if you bring 3 Greater Air, that's also only 700 points of a 2,300 point list, for example. So there are a lot of variations to this list, and it's really good at taking down the conventional list. As long as it baited your hammer units out, the Air Elemental is going to eat it up.
I can see the value in this. It's just a very reactive list. But you want to make that wall of hard to kill things and then zip around with your Air Elementals once they engage with your giant wall. And things aren't going to die too easily when they do hit your wall. You send 2 hammers into 1 regiment of Earth Elementals, and there's a good chance it's not shifting it. There's a non-zero chance that it's surviving. So they really have to be committing 2 hammers to an Earth Elemental regiment instead of spreading out the wounds, and then still sometimes not popping it is pretty disheartening.
And then the druid would search 2 Greater Air, 1 into each flank, and then something would charge it in the front, and they'll just pop those 2 hammers pretty handily.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think before they did the upgrade, giving them Crush 1, Thunder 1, I think they were just the Thunder 1 before.
Yes.
And I was using them back then and thought they were great value. So, when they went to Crush 1, that was just ridiculous. It really was. And you said about the Defense 4, but I don't find that a problem at all. With that high dash 18, they survive a lot of things. You're normally getting the charge in, and they'll survive against most counters.
And at height 5, they're sitting behind your height 3 screens, getting cover to shooting, but still being able to see over to charge.
I'll say in the formation, the Greater Air Elemental is still great, but it forces you to take Air Elemental hordes, which are not as great. They have 1 lower nerf, they are bigger footprint, they don't have any crushing or thunderous. The 2 hordes would be probably the tax in that formation.
I was just agreeing that Dash 18, even on Defense 4, it usually holds most things, especially when those things are just countering you. So you've already stripped Thunderous. You're likely putting them in a position where there's only going to be a single unit combating them. If any units, the I think the value of these greater air elementals is really getting into positions that there's not going to be an answer after they do their damage. So then you just get a reload and redo it the next turn. 180 point unit being able to pick up most hammers in the game is quite valuable, it turns out.
Yes.
Yeah.
I played a number of them over in the US. I remember when I played the games, my first role was to try and bait them out. And I didn't mind even losing a unit worth more. As soon as I got control of the greater airs, then I was happy I could control the game. But until they were under control, I never felt comfortable in my game.
Right. So the interesting thing about this is I think greatest air elementals lists are pretty popular, but none of them has won any tournaments lately. It's an interesting phenomenon that a lot of people hate them, but they are not winning yet. What do you guys have to say about that?
I believe they can win tournaments without a problem.
I agree. I think certain high-ranking generals that have won tournaments before just look at these and they're like, I don't really want to be that guy that takes the triple greater airs. And I think it's looked at as a crutch more than anything for a lot of people that I even know a couple people that were playing them before they were, as good as they are right now. And before they're the clear favorite even for this edition. And they've dropped the army just because they feel a little dirty playing what they know to be is probably the most overpowered unit in the game right now.
I think so too. Yeah. The last list I ran of this, I did it without surge in my list to make me feel better about using them because I love using the greater airs, but I just didn't think it was fair having that surge ability on them. They're just too powerful. They're still fine even without surge.
Yeah, that's a sign of a great unit right there.
Yeah.
The greater air having like 10 attacks is also amazing. I was playing a game against Herd, and then the opponent has 2 hordes of Scotch Wings. They were both shooting something from afar. And I'm like, I'm just going to take one greater air elemental and charge 1 horde of Scotch Wings and the other one charging the other horde. And I think I'm going to win this trade. And then sure enough, I did. I wavered 1 unit, slightly spiked die roll. It was a formation greater air, so it does have brutal. Eventually, the 2 greater air just grinded out the 2 Scotch Wing hordes.
Yeah.
Just from charging in front, just getting in the first charge.
Yeah. And they can launch themselves from terrain. So, the defense 4 from shooting, etc. You got plenty of heal ability in the list. I really don't find it a problem.
They have Pathfinder as well. So
yeah, exactly.
Obstacles are the only thing that's preventing these guys from hitting on 3s, which is pretty ridiculous in itself coming from an elemental. So
Phalanx.
Yeah. Good thing greater airs never charge the front of a phalanx unit.
Yeah.
Luke, you're doing it wrong.
Snare and all these things that you don't care about because they're greater air elementals.
Exactly.
They're just so maneuverable, so small, so cheap that it's very easy to pilot and get success out of them. So it's also very annoying to play against, and they shut down the conventional list pretty handily.
Down to 8 attacks, Mantic, please.
I'd just take the crushing or the thunderous off them.
Put them on a 75 mil like all the other surging flyers.
Yeah, that'd definitely pull them back a peg.
That is the least probable solution.
It is, but they could keep the same stat line. I will say they've already done it for Undead Worms in the Empire Dust's army. They used to be on 50s as well, but they're on 75s now. So
right.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on the actual sculpt, how big it is. I've not seen the actual greater air sculpt, whether it's big enough to look okay on a 75mm base. I think that's the biggest consideration because they do have the actual sculpt out already.
Dynamic basing is all I have to say.
Yeah.
So moving on, we'll talk about Luke's list. You did pretty well at Clash of Kings Australia this January 2023, right? There's a mistake there, 2023. It's a 2,000 point salamander list. So I'm just going to read it off. A horde of tyrants with mead of madness, 2 regiments and 2 hordes of Scotch Wings. One of the hordes have fire oil. 2 rhinosaur cavalry hordes with no items. 2 baby phoenixes. a battle captain with inspiring talisman, and 2 Gekota Skylord on Scorch Wings. No items. So a total of 12 units, 23 unit strength, 2,000 points. Talk to me about your thoughts behind creating this list.
You said about greater air elementals being bullies. Well, this whole list is a bully, basically. You get a lot of even top level players saying, I don't really care about how my opponent deploys, I just deploy in my own way and then I play my game from there, or I don't let them dictate my deployment. This is not that list. This is the list that you place things out to force your opponent to deploy in a way that's favorable to you, and then punish them for if they don't. I hadn't had a game with this list before the tournament. Game 1 was my game 1 with salamanders in general, not just this list, but salamanders. I finished painting at 12:30 midday the day before I had to leave. It was a good showing for the list, and I'm planning on playing salamanders throughout this year. The idea with this one is the 8 shooting units. I'm able to apply pressure. The shooting's not great, and it's all 18 inches, but there's a lot of them. Applying that shooting pressure at range can force my opponents into less favorable combats because they want to charge in sooner than they otherwise would. It's enough shooting that I'm not really outshot by many armies, and those that I am, I can just get in their face really quickly and hassle them that way. The Tyrants actually started out as a 3rd Rhino Cav horde. Part of the reasoning behind the Meter Madness was that it makes them the same points as they would have been if they were Rhino Cav. The reason why the Tyrants came in, one is that it's height 3, which means everything else on the list is height 4 and above. So the height 3 gives me the option of putting some height 4 things behind it to hide them and still be able to charge over. Gives me the option of putting the Phoenixes behind and shooting without cover over the top. Once we get into the scrap and some units of sort of resolve combats and we're facing in weird directions now, I might have a Rhino Cav or a Scorchwing horde looking over the top of a unit, and I still want to be able to charge in. So the height 3 has been really good for that. With the Mead, they actually have a threat range of up to 16 inches, which zones out a lot of units, and kind of people get really scared of it, which is one of the reasons as well. People look at Tyrants and say, hey, that's a scary unit, I need to take care of that. So they're busy focusing on a horde of Tyrants, trying to get hindered charges against them. I'll attack on 5s, I don't care. 30 attacks, crush 2, they're still doing a lot of hurt. Great all-round unit, really. And that gives me 3 real hammer units in the list at 2,000 points, which is pretty good. The Scorchwing pair most of them with a Skylord on a flank, fast flank, take out whatever small chaffy units they've got out there, and then turn in across the line or get behind it, and cause some havoc there. The Skylords are just a fantastic unit. 120 points for speed 10, flying, nimble, shooting, scoring characters that shoot on 3s. Because they shoot on 3s. It's only 4 attacks, but it's still putting consistent wounds out there, and they're getting flanks. The Phoenixes are absolutely clutch. They're as Jeff said with his Basileans, they've got heal, which you don't use as much as you think you would, maybe in round 1. But the shooting, it just adds dice to the shooting pool, which is great. And then when the time comes, they're a heck of a chaff piece. You fly them over the lines, 16-inch range. They're going to park in front of a unit. Even a lot of hammer units can't take one out in one go, and then they're regenning back and potentially lasting several turns. And with the height 6, no one's seeing through it to nimble charge around. Or there's been times where I haven't, I've wanted to heal or shoot, but I've still wanted to use them as a chaff piece. So you just fly them over and park them in front of a unit. They can't see around it. And you do your ranged attack or your heal or whatever you need to do, and then you just cop the charge. I've tried to rebuild my salamanders a few times, both at this points level and going up to 2,300 points. And every time I drop down to 1 Phoenix, I find a way to put a second one back in because they're just that good.
Yeah, I would say with the recent changes, the Phoenix seem very good. I would vote that it's a little bit too good. The Scorchwings are a bit overtuned as well. They are just such great value. Do you often win the games because of the Scorchwings getting into flanks and all that?
I mean, when half your army is Scorchwings, any game you win has to have something to do with Scorchwings. They have to be involved somehow. Part of it is just the threat projection, right? They do surprisingly poorly in combat, if I'm going to be quite honest. The real work in this is done by the Rhino Cav in particular. They don't have that many attacks, and they've only got Thunder 1. They do have Pathfinder, but obviously the attack back, if you don't pop something in one turn, they're hitting like a wet blanket. Coming back, even when you're getting flanks, I've had things you go, a horde in the flank, that's 28 attacks, I'm going to put some hurt on, and then they just don't do much.
Mm.
So they're just such a good utility unit that can zone out opponents, put some shooting hurt down, and get stuck into combat that people have to spend the entire game thinking about them. And that's really what I want from them.
I think anything that can shoot and threaten, and that's the key to what you were saying, is threatening. Because when they do go in, they are like wet blankets most times and they'll die. But as long as they're out there threatening the flanks, people react to that, and you're continually shooting them and threatening them with the hammers. And that's why I thought the list was so good. Out of the ones that I saw, that's a good list, I thought. Very well put together.
The speed 10 nimble flying as well. Late game, just, I'm going to go take this objective now.
Yeah.
That's always an option.
The trick with Phoenixes too, as you said, they're a great chaff piece, but I found you're best off using them against things like dragons and stuff like that. So what you want is a low number of attacks, but high strength because you don't care about it. Not the high number of attack units like cavalry and stuff like that, because they will drop them in one go with any reasonable roll. But a dragon won't. That's the best time to use them as a chaff piece. And
the TC2 cav as well, obviously, because with your 3 attacks on 3s with Crush 1, you're probably stripping Thunderous. And that's another point as well. I've recharged things with Phoenixes, and you get 9 attacks on 3s with Crush 1. Yeah. I'm usually playing elf bloody knights, and they'll still kill it even without Thunderous. They hit so bloody often.
Like the traditional 18 attacks, you usually score 12 hits, and even if you're wounding on 2s, that's 10, right? And then the Phoenix has a 18 route value, so 8 twice is not as easy to come by. But if you are fighting against something with 18 attacks and something to push its number of hits, like the elves having elite or even brutal, that might swing the math just a little bit in your favor.
Or
in their
any
favor.
of the cab that has Thunder 1, Crush 1, which there's so many of these days. I just wouldn't rather take the risk because they're too valuable. If you have to, you have to. That's just the way it goes. But I'd rather throw something else in front. Chuck a Scorchwing there. Let him die first. It's nearly the same bloody points. 120 compared to a Phoenix. So, yeah, Phoenix is much better value.
I wonder if the Phoenix is just too cheap, maybe.
It's definitely great value.
It's definitely...
Yeah, but that's what we're all doing. We're all picking units in our list that are great value.
Of course.
That's what I always do. Yeah.
Part of the thing of list building, is to find the units that you can combine together and that are good value. If you've got a unit that's subpar, I don't know, you can take it if you want, but I'll only do it if I have to.
Yeah, I always start by looking for the value first, which is what most of this list is. Obviously, like the Rhino Cav, 250 points, everyone always says, oh, that's pretty expensive. And it's like, yeah, but it's necessary in the list. So that's the necessary tax you've got to take to be able to let the rest of it work. And then defense 5-18 is pretty disgusting, to be quite honest.
Yeah. You can have less valued units by all means, because they will combine with the good value units to make the list work. So it's just getting those combinations going, I believe.
Yeah,
but, it's shown in all of our lists. We're all picking the things that are good value, that do the work, and that's, as I said, that's part of list building.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Without going over top.
I was just being a little bit facetious, is all.
One trend that we seem to see that is veering off that conventional list building wisdom is that you don't see traditional chaff pieces as much. We're talking about your gargoyles or the like, which is like under 100 points, 911 nerve defense tree, because they seem to only fulfill the role as chaff. Whereas if you pay a little bit more, like the Skylord on Scorch Wings, 120 points, you get more utility out of them in that they can shoot, they can fight a little bit. Same for the Scorch Wing regiments. Right, and even earlier in the list, like Jeff Traish uses the Snow Throw Primes, which punches pretty well as chaff and can take a hit. So they don't die to chaff, they only die to hammers. So that starts the hammer trade, right? And then you're trading 120 point utility unit for their hammers coming in, which is north of 200 points, and that starts the trade going in your favor.
Yeah, and not even all hammers will kill them.
Mm-hmm.
Any medium one. They still are 13, 16 defense 5, so it's nearly the same as a hammer unit.
Yeah.
as far as nerve and that goes. Like you said, the value chaff units are still the flying ones, and they're still very popular because they can go and get those late game scenario points. They can get to positions to chaff something up that a lot of the other chaff units can't do. For the armies that can get them, they'll still be very viable.
Mm-hmm.
Like you wouldn't run your Green Lady list without a Pegasus, would you?
Never.
No. Yeah, it's too valuable for it.
All right, with that, we've come to the next list. Adam's Elves, 2,300 points. Adam, would you like to read off your list?
Sure. This particular iteration list has Gladestalker Regiment, Horde of Sea Guard with Chant of Hate, 2 regiments of Silverbreeze, Horde of Dracons with the J-Boots, 2 Battlecat regiments, 2 Bolt Throwers, Elven Archmage, Mounted, Boots of Levitation, and Alchemist Curse 4, Nimue, then the Drakon formation. One of the Drakon's regiments is going to have Pipes of Terror, and the Drakon Lord is going to have the Trickster's Wand. Coming out to 24 units with 21 unit strength.
Yes, and I think Elves are on the rise lately. They have been winning quite a few tournaments, notably UK Masters, Pilgrimage, and Adam himself winning with this list at the KC One Day tournament. Yeah, you will see variations of this list. Probably some people might like to take more Gladestalkers and might be dropping down the Sea Guard. They will be having variable amounts of Silverbreeze because they're pretty good. Dracons, some of them might take 2 hordes, some of them might take a horde and a regiment of Quicksilver Lancers, but mainly just slight variations of these builds. Yeah, it's pretty strong. Lots of shooting, and it still charges you first with all the Dracons out there is the main idea behind the Elf list. Adam, I remember you saying that you don't enjoy playing it as much because one of the things about these Elves lists is that it denies the opponent from playing because you shoot them and kill them before they do anything, and then you charge them and kill them before they do anything. So that's not a very great experience for the opponent.
Right. And that's just the way I feel like the Elves are built to play. So yeah, it was definitely to a point where I absolutely wanted to change armies. And I still keep up with Elves, play with them every once in a while for a one day or on a UB tournament, but it is definitely not my go-to tournament army like some players that I know. So, but I think this version of Elves kind of fits the play style that I want out of them. I've seen certain Elf armies that are bags of hammers with lots of Dracons and the regiments of Cav, as well as the formation. I think Keith Randall ran a similar list to that at Adepticon, and he finished second at Adepticon, I believe. So it worked well for him. For me, I really try to find that value that we were talking about earlier. And the value units that I've always settled on were the Silverbreeze Cav, and most recently the Sea Guard unit. I like these kind of multi-purpose units that combat as well as shoot, really try and fit a play style around doing something every turn with every unit.
I really put them at the top of the heap at the moment, the Elves.
Mm-hmm.
They are quite good.
Because of the play style. Not by much. And it's fair enough too. The Elf players were down a bit for quite a while, so they're having their turn at the top. So that's things like Nimue, absolutely great value and can be such a pain. That Elven Archmage that you've got with the Alchemist Curse, that's a nightmare as well if you don't have an answer to it. I had one of my Snow Troll hordes one-shotted by it.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't have any inspiring near it, but yeah, some good dice rolling, obviously. And then they had the thing where you can re-roll one dice, which just, that character you get. Yeah, so they just, yeah.
Yeah, that thing.
That was painful.
Wow, they ran that.
Yeah.
Hey, if it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I don't blame them. It does work. First thing when someone does something to me like that is, okay, how can I use it in my next list? Probably not as good, but you can still, Alchemist Curse, especially the high ones, great value. There are answers to it, but I don't always take those answers in my list, so I suffer when I come up against it.
I almost always have a hex in my list for the Alchemist Curse, and then also for trying to shut down surging in with greater air elementals. So
something I should look at. I scrape the points and never find enough for it, but I should.
I think, the prevalence of hex these days to counter this type of unit is probably the reason why, given the points, like on Page's Gladewalker Druid, the crown instead of the mount tends to be a good option still, because it gives you that range without having to move if you're hexed. So that's a key one.
Yeah. Even if they do have hex, then you just run it behind a forest, then pop out and get the unit that you want. They hex you, will you run back again? You mightn't get to use as much, but you'll still use it. So you can't shut it down completely.
You just have to be
cagey,
careful with where you place. A bit cagier.
Yeah, exactly. Having hex on the Night Fiend or whatever it was, that's a good example because of the height 4. They're great ones to take it on, because a lot of the others, they will just go and hide behind a unit and your hexes.
And I have it here on my Drakon Lord as well. So again,
I didn't even notice, but yeah, exactly. They're the prime units to use it on for sure.
The height 4 units.
Definitely agree.
Even height 3, like I used to take it on a bully, the Trickster's Wand, and he can see over infantry. So worst case, you have to put him on a hill, but
and hex, the range is very far, right? Is it 30?
Yeah. 30, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very hard to hide from hex. So with that, the elves are the gatekeeper list right now. I think if you were to build a list, you should think about how to fight against this list or a variation of this list right now. And I think certain metas, right, they do not have that elf player, or someone doesn't want to be that guy and play elves, which I think shouldn't be the case. You should have a good meta representation in your meta, right? List diversity in your meta. So imagine playing a game of rock, paper, scissors where no one brings rocks. So then it's not as interesting.
Yeah. It doesn't matter what you've got. Everyone's got some tools that are really great that everyone else is jealous of. So, they've got these tools, and there's nothing wrong with elf lists. They're just very tough. And as you say, you've got to come up with some answers for them.
Right.
What would be some of the answers, like Adam alluded to, having Trickster's Wand against the Archmage or even Nimue?
I think some mounted individuals would be handy against these type of lists. Because it's an answer to the flying and it's an answer to the shooting.
Right.
It doesn't cost you much to put into a list.
Yeah, I would say against elves, typically the best tool that I would use against them is counter shooting. Not a lot of armies can actually have enough shooting in the list to really win that war, but if you do look a little closely, I do have 14 units, but there are 4 of them that do not score. So I only have 10 scoring units. So the elf list is quite elite, and 2 of them are battle cats as well that are in there meant to die, basically. So the elf army is going to be quite elite, and typically if you can take off 3-4 of their scoring units, it really starts to run out of that steam power towards the end of the game. So
there's a lot of defense for on this.
Yeah, it's definitely not an unbeatable list by any means. It's just a good list. And as you say, it's got that range, but they've also can outpace everyone else. They're faster,
right?
Faster cav. They've got the Dracons. They've got it's like you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. If you don't move forward, you get shot to bits. If you move forward, you get charged. So,
yeah. And I think the big thing is that you have to move forward. In my mind, the big thing when you're moving forward is preventing the double charges or preventing your key units from getting exposed to double charges. I didn't actually get to watch this game, but there was a game at Adepticon, Travis Tim versus Jason Burr, another well-known elf player out of the Minneapolis area. The game itself, Travis rolled 4 total dice. He rolled 3 attacks to hit with an individual, 1 attack to wound, and did not do a wound. And he won the scenario, so he won the game still.
Wow.
That's classic. Yeah.
That's the best win, right?
Right. But it was just, from my understanding, Travis maneuvered his units properly to where he's preventing these double charges from these hammers. The Drakon Horde, Nimble, he had the formation as well. The elf player did not want to take a risk essentially and relied on his shooting. And in the end, the shooting didn't do enough, and Travis won the scenario. I believe it was push was the scenario. So,
yeah, if you don't commit as an elf player, you will often end up backing up so that you can continue to shoot. And then you will have to take note of the amount of scenario play you're giving up by staying back to shoot.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The Drakons are the only true hammer in this list as well, right? So it's about preventing what they can do. You don't want the Drakon Horde to double charge with one of the regiments or with the with the Lord or something like that, because that's when your unit's going to disappear, guaranteed. Whereas if you can at least prevent it to get a single charge from the Drakon Riders in the front, there's a lot of units that can weather that for a turn. I think zoning that out while counter shooting off the things that you can is probably the way to beat this.
I find the Drakons one of the worst ones to get hit by, because they do have the Crush One, Thunder One, and they do have the Elite. They obliterate most hammers, the 15, 17 hammers that are in the game, where the other ones, like the Basilian ones, you can cop a charge off them and have a good chance of surviving. But that Elite, they just either roll 3s and above or 1s. That's all elf players seem to do. They don't know what a 2 is.
All good elf players.
Because of that hitting on 3s, rerolling 1s, there are times that you have a slight bit of luck. You don't end up on any 2s, and then you'll have between 15, 16, 17, and even 18 hits.
Yeah, it's not uncommon to see him get 16 hits when they come. But I suppose average is 14 to 15 or something. But
Yeah. And some elf armies even take a Bane chance to bump those guys up to when they hit defense 5 to start wounding them on 2s. I don't have that in this list, just didn't have the points to fit it.
I was looking for it, but
it can be quite devastating.
I think you overall have more shooting compared to other elf lists.
Definitely with the 2 Silver Breeze units.
And with my elf list, I'm actually more than happy to accept charges with this Horde of Sea Guard. The most updated version of this list actually drops the regiment of Gladestalkers for a regiment of Sea Guard. And then I think I upgrade a bolt thrower to a troop of Silver Breeze with the extra points I saved from it. But the issue that I had with elves early on in this edition was I was taking a horde of Palace Guard, and I found that they were getting ran down because they're just a big block unit, lots of points, and one of the only things that people can actually chase down that's not nimble or fast. So the Sea Guard having the phalanx and then also getting to contribute every turn of the game with their bows, I have found to be an extremely good pickup for my style of play. And now I just have a unit strength 4 unit that sits in the dominate circle, and I don't care if it gets double charged even by most things, and then I counterattack from there. So
because most things that are going to run down a speed 6 unit are cavalry.
Exactly.
So,
or flyers,
or flyers. That's right. So your Sea Guard works against both.
And I'm applying pressure with the 5 ups with steady aim. 5 ups to hit with steady aim is really good, and they have 25 attacks because of the extra attacks from being a spear unit. So
no, I play against them quite regularly, and they are. I know Paul Brown from the UK is one of the best elf players that I know of. And as soon as they did the changes and brought them out, he said, "Oh, this unit's," he was just saying how good it was. So, taken from him, I agree.
Salivating over the changes.
Yeah. They've gotten points drops and then other minor buffs throughout many different Clash of Kings, and I think they're finally at a point where they're competing against the Gladestalkers and any of the other infantry options that elves have at this point.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, they're offensively a budget Gladestalker unit, but defensively better, and they can come in hordes. So, like,
Right.
Yeah.
brilliant.
Luke alluded earlier that the only true hammers in this list are the Dracon Rider hordes. There are Dracon Rider regiments in the formation, but they do have nimble from the formation, so they'll be trying to cop a flank charge on the opponent. Yeah, but what the elves do is they use their shooting to whittle down your ability to defend yourself before they commit to it.
Yeah. So then you don't need a hammer to kill something that's badly wounded. So
that formation is just money. That nimble on the regiments and spell ward is exactly what they need. Pretty much anytime they charge in, they're in a flank, so they are a horde of Dracons. So
yes, I felt the pain.
So you just have to whittle that shooting and that initial charge. Your army to fight against the elves is just must be able to take it, both their shooting and then their first charge, and still be able to come out on top. Is probably what you have to build to win this. The elves, one of the weakness, are very fragile, low unit count and unit strength. They do not have heal. They do have the option to take heal in the Archmage, but nobody does so.
Nimbleway's got it, not much, but something.
Do they have access to Tree Herder? Do they have access to Tree Herder or Green Lady?
They have Tree Herder option, but not Wilt Father upgrade. So
the formation is really key to this. Like, one of the best formations in the game. It is really key. And the last 2 times I've played against elves, they've both had the formation, and I did win both those games, but the entire way that I did that was by not giving away flanks to the formation.
So next, Luke, I'd like you to introduce your Forces of the Beast 1995 points played at the 2022 December Australia Master. So it should be AUS.
Yeah, so this is a bit of a dumb list, and I guess more trying to prove a point. Everyone always says, "Oh, you get less skew at less points," and I'm hold my beer. And this one actually, I had an alternate ogre list that I probably would have done better with, done up, but just through I won every practice game with this list. And I kind of went, this is actually really fun to play. So I just decided, heck, I'll go for it. I didn't have any expectations of winning Masters, so I thought I may as well enjoy it while I'm there. So this is what I came up with at 1995 points. It's got 2 troops of gargoyles, 6 hordes of tortured souls, a Seductress with Gnome Glass, an Abyssal Warlock naked, the Despoiler Champion naked, so no Inspiring Talisman, didn't have the points, and a Manifestation of Bale. So only 2 Inspirers. It would have been nice to get Inspiring on the Despoiler, but just didn't have the points in the end.
Hey, the Seductress does inspire, so actually there's 3.
Yeah, you have 3.
Oh, it was 3, sorry. Yeah, but the Warlock doesn't matter. He's left behind. He's a backfield objective holder that can fire some shots.
He
maybe
can
try
still
and take something
run.
out late. Yeah, and he does. It's just often left behind and not into the thick of it, because this is a true alpha list. So there's not many games where I'm not turn 2 charging with it.
Doesn't the Mantic Abyssal Warlock have like wings on him? So you could have just cheated and said he flies speed 8 as well.
Yeah, could have tried to cheat. Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah.
So the Seductress is like super key for this list, considering how flimsy the entire army is. The only defense 5 units are the Despoiler Champion and the Manifestation of Bale. So the Seductress, not only is she a flyer that can get inspiring to wherever we need to, she's such a good chaff piece, because she'll charge anything and hold them up generally for at least a turn, sometimes 2 or 3, because the Gnome Glass and the Ensnare makes the first round they attack back basically meaningless. And then often she can weather the second round as well. And worst case, she can just turn and walk away because she's an individual. It doesn't matter if she's disordered from being hit in combat. She'll just individual turn and walk off, still at speed 10. So she's super key. Manifestation of Bale is mostly in there because with all of the fearless, flying units that can get in the face early, he just brings flanking opportunities, as well as the lightning bolt option as well. He also has From the Pit I Curse Thee, which may as well not have, because
have you ever used it?
No, because
I never have in 3 or 4 years. I don't know.
If you can shoot, you're casting lightning bolt, and if you could charge, you're charging. Right.
That's right. Yeah.
You guys are rookies. I've used it, and I only played Abyssals for one tournament.
Yeah, and then you put them away because you realized how bad that ability is, and you didn't want to be a part of it.
I did actually use it once, but it was just because I made sure that I used it. There wasn't any good gameplay in it.
Just for the story to say that you did.
Yeah.
No, I used it. It saved my flank. It saved me a game. So
yeah,
I used it to shut off 2 wing beasts and some harpies that were coming around my flank. So I used it and then just put a regiment of tortured souls in front of all 3 of them. So they had nothing that they could charge besides that. My opponent was like, well, I think that just won you the game.
Well, I'm glad to see someone can use it.
I said, hold my beer, and I still went on to lose it, but it worked.
What about the despoiler champion, Luke? I always find him very ordinary.
People worry about him more than they should, and he survives a couple of turns as a chaff piece. He's normally there to pin a flank or, just cause some pain, get around a combat. If I'm putting a couple of tortured souls into something, I can put him around to something behind with the nimble and sort of hold them up for a turn or 2.
Yeah, I would have thought like Zazu Su or something like that in there might be a better choice. Gives you the inspiring. It can palm wounds off onto the tortured souls who are going to get them back.
Funny story. The day before Masters is the Fortunes event, same points level, and because I only wanted to take the 1 army because I was on a plane, I decided to temper down my Masters list a little bit by dropping one of the Hordes of Tortured Souls, and I added 1 or 2 troops of gargoyles, Zaz, and I think I dropped the Despoiler for that.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, everyone said, "Oh, is that your Masters list?" I said, "No, this one is." And they're like, "I think your one from today is better." I'm like, yeah, actually, it was. Yeah.
I think it'd be a better combo.
Yeah. Oh well, hindsight's 2020.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I got the 2 troops of gargoyles, and like sometimes they'll charge off and hold up a unit, be a chaff, and other times they're hidden to try and score objectives. I think in one of my practice games, I was hiding them for multiple turns from ogre shooting, and then they got a flank charge off on a horde of siege breakers to take them off and win the game. So they're a great utility piece. And then the 6 Hordes of Tortured Souls, yes, you live and die by the 4s, but they're fearless, so they're always active. They've got Crush 1, Thunder 1, and Speed 8 flying, so it's just an alpha list, right? Like you're looking for the multi-charges. You want to get 2 Tortured Souls at least into anything at any time, and just punch face as hard as you can, and then turn and try and catch flanks.
Yeah, I remember seeing one of your games where there was 3 big hordes across from you, and you had 2 hordes in each one fighting them. I don't know that they all broke straight away, but you came out with pretty much all them dead, and yours were still all there, so. It worked. Yeah,
and if that was the game I'm thinking of, the casters left the game thinking, well, Luke's won this one, and they came back and my army was gone, and everyone says, what happened? And I just shrugged, I don't know, man.
Was that the game you won or lost?
That was the one that I lost with this list. So
no, that's not the one I'm thinking of.
I had a horde of tortured souls going into a regiment of rabble on a flank, and it took 3 or 4 turns to get through them. So they were supposed to take it out in 1 or 2 turns and then turn across the line and clean up. And then that just didn't happen. But the list went 3-1 at Masters. I didn't go 3-1 because round 1 is a list swap, and I lost round 1 against this list.
I love the list swap.
You do?
It was my idea. I was the one who introduced it into it. Just to keep people tempered on their lists.
Jeff is like, I can build some weird ass shit over here, and I can play anything that anybody else is going to bring. Yeah. So this sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, no, just you do see the ones with triple dragons and stuff like that. So I like to think if you want to play it, then be prepared to play against it. Type of thing.
So Jeff's opponent receives the 3 hordes of men at arms and wondering, what do I do with this?
Yeah. My opponent said, actually, I'm really glad I'm playing this. He really liked my list. I went, okay, I really like yours too. It was a Green Lady list, which was very nice.
All right, moving on. Okay, so this is a goblins list that I'm currently having, and this is the current list that I'll be playing moving forward this year. It is 4 hordes of rebel, horde of trolls with the dead packs, mincer mob troop with skirmisher boots, 3 war trombones, 1 mop up launcher, 1 sharpstick thrower, 2 wingets, 2 goblin slashers with the trombone upgrade, a king upgraded to Grony Snark with Jareth's pendant that is Headstrong Aura, 2 wizards, 1 with Inspiring Talisman, upgrade to Knowledgeable level 2 spellcaster. It has its base Lightning Bolt 3 and it has an Alchemist Curse level 2, which is 2 base dice plus the defense. And the other wizard has the basic Lightning Bolt, Bane Chant, Hex 2, and Conjurer's Staff. And lastly, it's a King on Chariot, totaling 19 units. And a lot of units, but only 23 unit strength because there are a lot of
War
heroes
machines.
and war engines. Yes, so
Yeah.
only 11 units score out of the 19. So there's 8 units that don't score.
And no true hammers because goblins don't have any.
Yep. So in order to make up for it, I have a horde of trolls. Part of the reason is also because I can't bring myself to paint a 5th horse rebel right now. Mincer mob troop. It used to be a regiment with brew of sharpness. So that is a very scary unit because it's 21 plus d6 attacks, hitting on 3 with Crush 1, Thunder 1, and Brutal. It was such a scary unit, but it was the only scary unit in the list. So it's very easy for the opponent to control it by deciding when it gets to attack and what it gets to attack, because mainly it always starts parked behind a rebel horde. So what they usually do is to send stuff to hold up the rebel horde without killing it. So the mincer mob, that regiment always spends 2/3 of the games just sitting around doing nothing, and that is a lot of points. So with that, I downgraded it to a troop with skirmisher boots. So if you were to do the same trick on the rebel horde, I am definitely still going to be able to nimble charge you in return, a bit with less hitting power, but at least I get to fight. And with that, it frees me up more points for more shooting goodness. So this is like the shooting variant of the Night Stalker Scarecrow Traish list, because it still has 4 hordes of rebel for you to punch into. And then it attacks you in return with mixed arms of definitely much more shooting as compared to Night Stalkers and weaker melee punch. It does suffer against high defense armies, or like Empire of Dust, which is also high defense and a lot of healing. So if they have high defense, I usually need a few rounds of shooting to take them out, but then I don't have the luxury of that because they'll start healing off the wounds. And Night Stalkers is also a pain because they have stealthy across the board, right? And for certain variations of Night Stalkers, they do have planar apparitions as well, which will be a bigger pain. Lastly, against elves is an interesting one. I think the goblins, if played well, is supposed to be able to win the elves list because they just have more nerf on the board. So eventually you shoot the goblins off, but eventually they still have a lot to hit back at you and you don't heal them back, is the idea. I'm not sure if your local meta would have a lot of goblin players, but if you do, you probably would have to have a solution against goblins as well. So I think that is why there's also a proliferation of high defense armies, especially in dwarves, because dwarves are the ones that can easily do high defense. What do you guys think?
Well, I got a pretty good goblin player around me.
He didn't play goblin this Adepticon.
Yeah, he looks at goblins like I look at elves, where it's just he brings it out for masters at this point is all. But for those that don't know, we're talking about Travis Tim. So I look at Travis's goblin army as kind of the golden standard for goblins when it comes to the shooting trash. Yeah, your list here page has a lot of similarities, but it also has some combat tools to go with it. So, but as far as addressing goblins, I've given up because anything that I tried to bring, I could skew a list knowing an exact scenario playing against Travis, and I still would lose. And so at this point, it's one of those where I don't build lists thinking that I can compete with a Travis Tim goblins army. I just build lists to compete with everybody else that I would play.
I would have thought shooting might be a weakness, like a good thing against this list, especially with a height to get over and get at the war trombones. Because if you can get those out of the way, the rest of the list will pretty much fall apart. We get obviously you got the slashes and that there.
With Page's list, I think you might be right. I played elves mostly through all of second and a little bit of third edition, and my elves never were able to beat a competitive goblin player, whether it was Travis, Shannon Shoemaker, any of the kind of the notorious top generals for goblins. It feels like you're winning turns 1 through 4, and then turns 5 and 6, they just wipe the rest of your army off the board. And they just still have enough stuff left. So
that's why I say that if you can get at the war trombones, you can take them out from behind the line. That takes a lot of it out.
I would, yeah.
But obviously, got them on the slashes as well. But they're the things that and obviously Grony Snark. I hate that guy with a passion now. One game he killed 3 regiments of mounted sons. Another game he killed 2 regiments. This on his own.
How did that happen?
He just rolled well.
You just roll good, Paige, obviously.
Yeah, that's all you do.
I have not had a crazy spike with Grony Snark so far. It's always been 3 wounds. It's like,
yeah, no, he was doing like 11 or 12 wounds every time. And then I'd be 15, 17 and bang, gone.
Yeah, so its average should be 2.5 hits. Blast D3, that will be, it should average 5 hits. And on a Crush 1 Thunder 2, maybe 4 wounds. 4 to 5 wounds, it should be the expected outcome. But because it has blast, so it can be very swingy.
Yeah. Obviously, good dice always do it, but
I would agree with Jeff. One of the linchpins of the Goblins list are the 3 trombones, and you will often find them together, centrally located, because as a war engine, they can't move over walls, they cannot march. So they are always shambling 5 inches up until they're in position to shoot. And because they are behind Rebel, if you have sources of shooting that's taller than height 2, you can get some damage into the trombones. They're only 8-10 nerf, so it's very easy to waver and then route them.
Yeah.
When I was playing against Steve Foster with Abyss, the only time I won was the game that I could take out the 3 trombones very easily, because he made the mistake of putting the trombones on the hill. So suddenly my warlocks were shooting without cover, the lightning bolt was going in without cover, and then my seductress went into the third one. So within 1 turn, I shut down all 3 war trombones, because if you look at the other shooting options of goblins, they do shoot, but they don't have a lot of attacks, whether it's the wing it or the wizards or the bang it, sharp stick thrower, more pub launchers. You can't expect a lot of wounds out of them because they do have not a lot of attacks. So the most value for money attacks are the 3 war trombones with 65 point each. 3 of them is 195 points. Just under 200 points, you have 30 attacks. So that is the linchpin to getting a lot of value out of the goblin shooting. You can argue that the slasher also has the trombone weapon, so it has 10 shots, but it is also 220 points. 1 slasher is equivalent to 3 trombones worth. Of course, it's multi-purpose because it can get into combat afterwards.
And it's unit strength too.
Yeah, the key is to shut down the trombones. If you can shut down the goblin trombones early before they get value out of them, the game will go in your favor. So that is one of the things you have to consider.
One of the other things you can do against them is, again, as you said, they're normally sitting behind the hordes of rabble. And I played Steve Foster at the pilgrimage, and he had his 3 behind a horde of rabble. And I put a regiment of the Night Raiders into the front of the rabble and just sat there and fought them, and he couldn't shoot me and he couldn't get forward.
Yeah.
So I was able to then take on the rest of his army while that was pretty much stuck there. So they didn't get into the game till right near the end, and then they were getting charged. So
height 2 into the rebel without killing the rebel is also something.
Yes, it's a good way of doing it. Even an individual would have a similar effect.
Yeah. So for the goblin player, it has to be careful to have some height 3 elements to help take out whatever's stalling the rebel. Yeah, whether it be like the trolls here, mincer mobs, mincer monsters, the singular mincers, or the king on chariots, or even the slashers would be key to unjamming the rebel from height 2 units, jamming them up.
I didn't realize the slashers were unit strength 2. That's unusual, isn't it?
All slashers are now 2. But the goblin one's the one that gets the trombone upgrade, so it's clearly the winner.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be a trend that will likely see most Titans going to unit strength 2, potentially this next Clash of Kings even.
Does that mean I'll get unit strength 2 Phoenixes?
Oh God, I didn't think about that.
Please.
Yeah. With a point cost.
I'll be petition for a points increase for the
Phoenixes,
especially if they are
nothing to see here.
On the slate for unit strength 2.
Yeah, if you look behind me, I've got 2 Phoenixes there that I've had printed out.
The other thing with the trombones as well is like flying heroes. A lot of lists are taking like a someone with wings or something like that. Flying heroes, getting them into there. If you can get them around the side, they'll
or a 50-point Thane does the trick.
He's too slow though half the time.
Yeah, I know. But they don't bother about him. That's the thing. They'd rather shoot something else.
Exactly. And I haven't played against goblins with my salamanders yet, but I did play against dwarves at Clash, and he had 2 flame belchers, which are very similar in utility. And I possibly overcommitted to taking them out, but I just I knew they needed to go. They were one of the dangers for my list, so I committed quite heavily. Straight up the guts to take those out.
You charge them or do you shoot at them?
Both. They were behind a hill, but Scorch Wings are height 4.
Yeah, but they are defense 5, no?
That's where things like the Phoenix would be great against trombones, because you can land within 18, shoot them, and you can't shoot me back no matter what you do, because you've only got a 17-inch threat, and they'll probably waver them in one shot. Might get lucky and kill them, and that's just one-on-one.
Definitely.
Another thing to consider when combating a goblin army like this is there are a lot of war machines and individuals that aren't going to be scoring. Realizing what's going to be most important to the scenario and making that decision early on and kind of sticking with it is going to be a good thing to be aware of, because usually the non-scoring units are the ones that are going to beat your face in, like the war trombones, Grony, the wizards, and Bangants will put a number on you. But if you take out 5 hordes of rabble and a couple other of the scoring units, they're down to less than 5 scoring units that potentially have to get across the board, or whatever the scenario might be. It could be the deciding factor. Even if you have nothing left in your army, you could still potentially win the game because of that.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. Regarding the trombone, I remembered that there are games that I have to hide my trombones behind the slasher. The slashers are height 6 until they're ready to fire out. Yeah, so that's one of the things I do. They're lined up in a in a straight line behind the slasher, because the slasher is 75 mil. And if my 2 slashers are
you get 2 slashers
deployed in different zones, then you only have 1 slasher to hide behind.
Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah, regarding the things that don't score, I have a couple of games where things charge my war engines that would be like my mop-up launchers and sharp stick throwers, and I totally don't mind that at all. If you're a flying hero or individual or even a flying monster, it's like, sure, go ahead, right? Because this thing doesn't score at the end of the game anyway, and they're only 60 and 75 points respectively, and your flying unit is out of position, because usually these 2 war engines are in the corner of the map away from other stuff, so it's like you're wasting time getting at this unit anyway. So I totally don't mind that, so you have to keep that in mind. Some people, they see war engine, I gotta charge it with my individual, that's what my individual is supposed to do.
Got to get those triple attacks anywhere you can.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not the right answer. Yeah, sometimes it's really not the right
answer. But it
answer.
makes you feel good. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more pump launches are great. I love
particularly
that.
with 4 rabble.
They caught a slight nerf that they're indirect, so you can't
Oh, do
deliver
they?
more pups to rebels near you. You can only deliver it to more pups further away.
Yeah. You say for armies like Trident Realms and stuff like that, they're brilliant because they're always hitting on.
They're
fours or
forced with
whatever
3
it is.
attacks. Yeah, blast.
But 6 attacks, isn't it?
3 attacks
3
each.
3 with
But
blast
blast
and 3.
C3.
No, I mean the more pups
6
themselves.
Oh, the more
pups,
pups,
yes.
Yeah.
6. Yeah. So it's a good way of getting damage out on those sort of armies that that you're hindered against or you got in snare or whatever. They're just pumping out those wounds every time.
I consider more pop launchers like able to shoot into combat because I'll shoot it into the rebel that's in combat and then it delivers 6 attacks at hitting on force, crush 1. So I think of it that way.
Definitely.
Mindfog, great anti-war trombone tech, given the range of Mindfog, and if you can get a wizard on a hill or around or a taller wizard, because you're popping them on a 9 or wavering on a 7, so that can help temper the hurt that they put out.
Yeah, especially on the planar apparition, they are height 5, I think.
Yep.
So it's very hard to hide. So the only way I can hide from them is via the slasher, because sometimes I hide behind trolls because depending on the height of the opponent's shooting units, hiding behind trolls might be enough, or the mincer mob.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next. Adam, your Kings of Winter list, and this tournament was in 2023 January. It won first place. It's a 2,400 point tournament with an extra special tournament unit. So maybe you can read off the list first.
I start out with 2 regiments of skeleton spearmen, a troop of mummies, a horde of mummies, a horde of skeleton warriors, 2 enslaved guardian hordes, 2 scavenger regiments, a soul snare, undead worm, the monolith Sebek Ray, Idol of Shobek, and then I took the Ammonite Pharaoh on Royal Chariot with Blade of Slashing, and at the time I could give him Host Shadow Beast 3 and he could gain the extra attacks even though he himself was not an individual. But that has since been changed. The tournament did a special Frost character option, so you had a choice between a monster, chariot, or like a Drakon, a 75 millimeter flying monster as well. I ended up taking the monster, which gave you a random aura that benefited your army. So it was kind of cool, but I mainly took this version of my EOD army because one of the special characters that you could take had aura stealthy. So I felt like shooting just wasn't going to be viable. Otherwise, those enslaved guardian hordes that I have, I do commonly run them as enslaved guardian archer hordes as well, in pretty much an identical list. So
are they the same points?
The guardian archers are 10 points more base, I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
I've been working on an EOD list lately, so I've been watching some of your games on -28s and trying to get ideas from it.
This EOD army is pretty solid. It's stayed fairly much the same through all of 3rd edition here. The only thing that's really been changing is the monster option.
Mm-hmm.
Bone Giants were my first true love back when they were pretty good. Now they feel just a little underwhelming with all the changes to withdraws and disengaging and everything. So I'm trying out the Undead Worm. I honestly use him more as chaff than anything else in this list. So really what this army is built to do is just to slowly take board control. So just shamble up the board. It almost always will deploy in a denied flank. So I take up half the board up to maybe 2/3 of the board and I just move forward. Then it just tries to play directly to the scenario from there. But prevent double charges to the key units. Usually enslaved guardians are deployed in a secondary line, and you don't have to worry too much about flyers or anything getting around because you have Surge to protect you. So well, you played that game with the 3 dragons, Adam Padley, remember?
Yep. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
And I thought, how are you going to match up against that? But you end up winning it. It was,
yeah. that was a fun one. So
Yeah,
yeah,
very interesting one.
Everybody had their money on Adam, you know.
Yeah, no, I know they did. Well, you see 3 dragons, it's like, oh my god. But yeah, they are a good answer to those sort of things.
It was kind of early on in my EOD playing as well, so I felt a lot more confident with the army after much more practice. But EOD is an army that I just really enjoy the mechanics of. I'll be honest, I rarely actually do surge mechanics with this army. The way that I move it and deploy it, I want to play it as if it doesn't have surge. And then my opponents usually just have to respect the fact that I have surge, so it forces them into positions that they otherwise could have been able to take advantage of.
Yeah, that's right.
You usually, high skill opponents aren't going to give you good surging options. So you just have to play a solid game. And then sometimes you win out certain flanks or combats that will open up the surge mechanics later in the game.
Yeah, one thing about Surge, I also have Surge 4 on my Druid in Order of the Green Lady, and I almost never cast it because I have Earth Elementals. But just the fact that I got Surge means they can't move something beside my Elementals off my front arc, So like Adam, like you said, a good player will never let you get a good Surge, but that doesn't mean the Surge did not affect them, because they have to play differently to end up in the situation that they don't give you a good surge. So it has already affected their game just based on the fact that you have surge. So sometimes you don't need to cast surge to get the benefit out of it. You already forced the opponent to play differently just by the fact of having it.
Right. This army is just so tough too, with all the heal mechanics. Aura, Iron Resolve from Shobik, Life Leech built in, drain life, heal. The only thing mechanic-wise that's missing is a Radiance of Life in the army, but that would be probably a little over the top. So,
yeah.
What about the behemoths? I really like the look of them.
Defense 6, right?
Yeah, they've got the Slayer D6 as well.
Yeah, and they hit on 3s.
Yeah, I think they look really good value.
They're really good. I haven't played with them. One, modeling. I just don't have a model option for them currently.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2, I have found that, again, when you're playing against good players, they know how to really mitigate those units. And a shambling chariot base does not threaten surge near as well as a square base would.
Right.
And the defense 6 is really good, at least the way I've played EOD and my experience. I just don't need it.
Yep.
Shobik kind of fills that role, and I almost never have felt like, I wish I had another one of these types of units.
Yeah.
So
I was looking at the damage output. I thought it was quite impressive for against large infantry and things like that, and even against the normal units, it's still the hitting on 3s and crushing 2, and then the defense 6 and life lead. Yeah, I thought
it's a viable unit for sure. I think
very well
people have been taking it in their lists as well.
Yeah.
The question is whether Shobik is mandatory.
No, he's not mandatory.
As to the Soul Snare as well.
Yeah.
No, I've said many times before, and I'll stand by it. If I were playing in a tournament that only allowed one living legend, and I was playing EOD, that living legend would be the monolith every time for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is it the threat of being able to search from anywhere?
Yeah, pretty much. Also, unit strength, inspiring. Like it just is a key support piece in the army. It has pretty much everything that I want out of a support piece. And then it also just breaks all the rules for casting surge, so you can't actually stop it. Outside of a torque of dissonance, you can stop it for 1 turn. I'll cast surge when you hex it. I don't give a crap.
The monolith can still search even if it's disordered.
The rule is it can never be disordered.
Right.
So there's just no way to get around it, even with like the Trident Realms shooting guy that disorders and Kairos. Yeah. So he is immune to disorders.
It's the best surge caster as well because it doesn't have to move with hex. Like,
right.
It's not that you don't even care about the wounds. It's like it doesn't have to move to get that surge off. So it's the most consistent surge by far. And then you're not taking say if you had a only one living legend, although that's not a rule, but one hero in a tournament, well, you're not taking Septic Ray, so then what do you take? Are you taking someone that can cast Surge or not to fill that gap? It kind of opens up your options if you choose the Monolith.
Right. And I treat the Monolith, it's the threat range. So in order to get the same threat, I would have to take at least 2 casters to spread out across my board. So he, in my experience, counts as 2 Surge casters, and I only ever need 1 more in a 23 or 2,400 point army. And again, I rarely use the Surge though, but it's being able to threaten it across the entirety of my line.
Mm-hmm.
The shooting armies a big problem for Empire of Dust?
Nah, I actually love playing against elves.
Yeah.
Because you have so much heal, your things are mostly fearless.
Well,
and as long as they don't take it off, the moment they don't take it off, you heal a bunch of wounds off of them. So
there's not that much heal in the list, really.
Septic Ray has heal 5.
Yeah.
The Soul Snare can drain life. And there's Iron Resolve Aura
but if the
going
Soul
around.
Snare exposes itself to elves, it's going to cop it as well, I would imagine.
Well, it doesn't really expose itself because what I do is I create like a little gap this big and I shoot between my units.
I remember playing you. Even when I hexed you, it didn't work.
So I'm going to have cover, and the Soul Snare has stealthy built in, so I'm not too afraid of the elf shooting.
Okay, fair enough.
If they're focusing on that, then I just heal that.
Yeah.
So
No, just wondering.
Shovik does have heal 5 built in as well.
Right. Yeah. No, I was just wondering from building the list myself, trying to figure out where the weaknesses were. And I thought because of the shambling moving slowly across the board, I just thought the fact of a person shooting the hell out of you and you can't do much about it would be a real problem. But you play it, so obviously you know better than I do. I just wondered.
You can still apply pressure to those armies. Scavengers are really the MVP of this army when it comes to winning scenarios. They're disgusting. They're disgustingly good.
Yeah, you compare them to gargoyles. They're 5 points more, and you trade the regen for life leech, but you get defense 4 and 11-13, which is surprisingly resilient.
Very, very resilient.
Wow, I'm just looking at it now and it's like, wow, their stat line is so good.
Yeah.
My favorite thing is that they're height 3, so they sit behind my infantry line and I can charge out over. So it's so good.
That's amazing.
I mean, they get shot at usually, but usually with the cover, they can get wavered and whatnot, but I'll just heal them if I have nothing else to heal anyway. So
if they're shooting at them, your higher value targets are safe.
Right.
The other thing I hadn't noticed when building the list was the skeleton spearmen being unit strength 3.
Jeff, you haven't been listening to me for a while.
Well, as I said, I've only just started the last day or 2 looking at them.
You're good. But the 2 skeleton spearmen regiments have been a staple in my army since I created it. Let's do the math real quick. I know I've said this on many other podcasts and stuff, but so phalanx. So if you're getting hit by anything that's affected by phalanx, there is not a hammer in the game that on averages will break this unit without a magical item upgrade. The heaviest hitting unit that I can think of is going to be a horde of Frostbane Cavalry. So they go from hitting on 4s to hitting on 5s with their 30 attacks. So 10 hits on average. They're wounding you on 2s. Let's just say 9 wounds, even though it's 8.33.
8 point something, yep.
Even then, they need a 6 twice to kill this unit because there's so many sources of inspiring. You're going to have inspiring. So I'll take a 6 twice from a 250 point hammer against a 105 point regiment of spears.
Yeah. The unit strength 3.
6 twice is 50-50, and because the wound is 8.3, it's less than 50%.
Very impressive.
So we are moving on to final thoughts, and to do this segment, I'll first move the slide backwards. So I would say EOD, are they a top tier army right now?
In my opinion, yes. In the right hands, yes.
Goblins, what about them?
They are the top tier army from my experience.
The Forces of Abyss, they do have a weakness against shooting. Luke, what do you think?
Yeah, I wouldn't say top tier, but they've certainly got multiple tools and options that they're viable for top tier play.
Jeff, you have played them quite a bit.
I think they've slid back a bit with the Glade Stalkers and that coming out. That hurts them.
The elves, I think we all agree, it's top tier right now.
I
So-
think
That's a top 3 for sure.
Yeah.
Have a consideration against EOD, goblins, elves, salamanders. That's an interesting one. They do seem to be getting better with each Clash of Kings. Where do they stand right now?
My opinion is, if you look at tier lists, I wouldn't put them as S tier, maybe A minus. But I think the problem with salamanders so far has been, I think the way the list has been designed, the army has been designed to want you to play in, I think is the way people are trying to play it, and I think it's not the optimum way to play it. So I think there's a couple of builds in there that are very strong. People just have to find them.
Greater Air Elemental, as we said, it's probably top tier, and just that the top players are refusing to play this list.
Yeah, the rest of the list isn't fantastic. It's just the Great Air.
Yeah, I was going to say, I like how you didn't ask if nature is top tier. You asked if Greater Air Elementals are top tier.
Yes, because that's the crunch to it.
Yeah, it's. Do you want to take Glade Stalkers, stealthy Glade Stalkers as the front line in Sylvankin, or do you want to take Earth Elementals as the front line in Force of Nature?
Yep.
I think both are top tier lists, though.
Yeah, they're both good.
I would put them at that S tier that Luke was talking about, because you have the Gladewalker Druid caster in Force of Nature, or you have Nimue, which is my favorite threat, as a Surge caster in the Sylvankin.
Yep.
Varangur, what do you guys think of Varangur?
Strong, but I wouldn't put them top tier. Maybe the A level, like a lot of the lists that are out there, very good, but not the top of the feed.
They don't have any special tricks, right? You're just having good value units in this.
Yeah, lack of hurling, and that's one of the things that I find is a big problem. And dealing with flyers, you can take your own flyers to try and counter it, but they're the weaknesses I've found.
I think they really thrive with their characters, their scoring characters.
Yeah,
that's what really
definitely
sets them up there.
Yeah, that's the strength of it.
What about its cousin, the Northern Alliance?
Also, same thing.
Yeah.
I would even put Northern Alliance ahead of Varangur just from the builds I've been seeing. I think they have better chaff options in the Troops of Dwarves. It's strong.
Skin Hunters.
They just lack the cavalry.
That's interesting because for the
Right.
longest time, a lot of people have been preferring Varangur over Northern Alliance. I think Varangur is a little bit more straightforward in that it has the Mounted Sons or
Yeah.
even the Foot Infantry version. Is it now Huskarls? They no longer have Foot Sons of Korgan, I think.
Yes, the Huskarls are that unit.
They're in both.
They're in both, yeah.
To compare the two, if there's a build that Varangur is good at, it's going to be much better in Varangur than Northern Alliance. So if you're playing that Cav or that Alpha, or if you're playing the certain builds, I think anything that Varangur can do well, it will do much better than Northern Alliance. But the builds that Northern Alliance can do, the builds that they are better at, are builds that you basically can't do really well in
Yeah, like
Varangur.
the ice
So more
elementals and
combined arms and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
I think the two key things in Northern Alliance that sets them above is Harim, also the Thane that can take the rally standard,
yeah,
turning Huskarls into a 16-18 with Fury, turning Troops of Dwarves into an 11-13 defense 5 wall walking up as well. Like that's what Travis's win at Adepticon was, and it's just a nasty line to have to chew through.
yeah. 19 nerve trolls. It doesn't matter where it goes. It's making it, a massive difference for a very cheap price.
Right. Yep.
And they've got Glade Stalkers,
Ice Skin Hunters.
They do.
frosty
Yeah.
Glade Stalkers.
Night Stalkers, where do they stand now?
They've slipped a bit.
They're not where they were before.
No, they've slipped.
Honestly, I think I'm more inclined to put them at like the A- to B tier even at this point. At least the way that I was playing them. I'm sure there's plenty other builds. They don't lack from variation of build. All their units, I feel like, are very playable in the army. So the Traish version is less competitive, I think, than what it was for sure.
Yeah, I think they've slipped for sure. And you're seeing it in most of the results around the world. They're not right up the top like they were before.
There's a reason elves are winning. Night Stalkers got nerfed.
Yeah.
Basileia, I think Steve Huro's tournament Bull Run just had the first and second place being Basileia.
If that's UK, I'd assume that it's probably 2000 or 1995.
So where speed is slightly ahead of the curve when it comes to
Yeah.
that point size, right?
Yep, I think Basileia is one of those ones that's just better at lower points comparatively to higher points. So you'll see it do better at those tournaments.
But it wouldn't be a list like my one. So
Yes.
I wouldn't recommend my one for it. But yeah, they're still they're up there. They're up there, but not the top tier.
I would really love to run Man at Arms. This was one of the top reasons why I would like to speak to you about this. I would like to run Man at Arms back in my Out of the Green Lady list because they do have Man at Arms.
Yeah. They don't get the Iron Resolve, but
the regiments of Lohi, I think, are really what unlocks the ability to take these types of hordes. It's nasty. It's very similar to what I was doing with.
They're very expensive, but at 100
regiments of the Lohi.
Yeah,
they're cheaper than Soul Flares.
Yeah, but Soul Flares hit better than they do.
Oh, these guys got Crush 2 built in. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Soul Flares get the 12 attacks though, and Wind Blast.
Stealthy.
You're a Lohi have Inspiring.
Yeah, I know.
Soul Flares have to
the whole idea. Yeah, I had to use them to do the Inspiring in the list.
Right.
I had very little otherwise.
I very quickly pulled out the Bull Run results. Cy Brand was running Basileans, where he's usually a Redkin player.
Yeah,
he came in first place, and Richard Luke was also Basileia, came in second place.
There you go.
Yeah, are there any boogeyman lists that we failed to cover?
We didn't really go over ogres, and I think that's the one of the cream of the crop at the moment. It's very well represented everywhere. Lots of players are playing it, and they're a very strong list. So
I don't think they're as powerful as they were when all the regiments of warriors unlocked. So you won't see the 9x9, but I think the balanced version with a couple of Siegebreaker hordes was probably the better version anyway. It was less skewed. So
that's how I played them. Yeah, 2 or 3 hordes of Siegebreakers. Except that time I ran 5.
Except for that one time. We all got to go too far eventually, right?
The Siegebreakers themselves also got a point increase. I think it's 15 points up.
Yep.
And normal Garrock got a huge point increase.
Yeah, they definitely copped some nerfs, but I think they needed to. I think they were on top of the table before, them and Night Stalkers.
So they have pretty good medium shooting with lightning bolts and sergeants with bows. After that, they still have lots of scoring units. Everything punches decently well. Yep.
Yeah.
All scoring units. So scenario wise, it's just great when you can take all scoring units in your army and they can likely field 14 to 16 drops pretty easily. So
yeah, they do have their weaknesses, but they're still very strong.
So coming back to this conventional wisdom, I think idea of Chef has changed significantly. That you'll see much less of those gargoyle-like units, but you'll see more of the 110, 120 point multi-purpose units.
Those are my favorite ones. But also, the gargoyle type unit does have its place, but I think it's not to just throw away like they've traditionally been used.
Traditionally, this is to get your big unit, your big hammers to a favorable charge. And I think the game is not that simple anymore.
And I think that the chaff is blending with that support unit that you have listed separately more than anything else, where even the Phoenixes we talked about, 145, that can be chaff, and that's providing heal and shooting. The Gecko to Skylords, the Scorchwing regiments, Troops of Silver Breeze, all those guys are within that range of low 100 points. They're providing other usage as well as shooting. And then you have more of that thick chaff in the Butcher Flesh Rippers, the trolls that Jeff was running.
Yeah, the large infantry heroes.
Those types of chaff pieces, it's going to take a lot to kill me. And when you commit a lot, I'll just counter you and we'll start trading in my favor.
In the Kingdoms of Men with the flying wizards on pegs, they were always a favorite. They shot with their lightning bolt and then thrown in as a cheap chaff unit.
Absolutely.
Unicorns with wings as well. And you're seeing more the Earth Elemental regiments, the thick chaff. like when you throw a chaff unit away to protect a unit that you're putting in somewhere else to stop the multi-charge or the flank or whatever, traditionally you're expecting that chaff unit to die in the next turn while you consolidate. What if it doesn't die? What if it's a regiment of earth elementals and now that unit is held up for 2-3 turns? And potentially blocking up those behind them? That's when you're sort of getting real value out of a chaff piece.
Yeah, agreed.
We didn't cover it much, but the troop of mummies that I took in my EOD army is actually one of the most valuable pieces that I've added to that list. And it was brand new to that tournament. At 2,300 points, I'm actually taking 2 troops of them now. Dash 14, defense 5, regeneration, and they still have a good combat output compared to the regiment with 10 attacks. So
I ran a list with 4 of them in it before in the undead. They're just so good.
We've all just found those value units that fill the roles that we're kind of looking for the right price. And that's really what all these lists have in common, is that there's value somewhere in some form that we're looking to get out of it.
Yeah. All right. With that, we hope that this discussion has given our listeners some thoughts about how to go about building their list, especially to compete in the current meta, which is the main focus of this podcast. With that, I'd just like to do a quick shout out to my patrons. 1 Peep Anonymous, 2 Peep Luke Schafer, who's here with me today, and 3 Peep Guy Harper, and 4 Peep Alessio Serp. And do like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, comment, review. You can hear the podcast version on Newbie Dice Podcast. And if you'd like to support me on Patreon, it's on patreon.com/newbiedice. And with that, I'd like to thank my 3 guests here today for sticking with me for 3 hours. Thank you so much, guys. I think we got some great content. Always a pleasure talking shop with you, Adam, Jeff, and Luke. We also talk a lot of lists on After Dark as well. So with that, I thank you for listening. Everybody say bye.
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 I should have a keep counter charging or something like that going on, but I haven't thought about it yet.
Keep newbie dicing.
Keep dicing.
Keep newbie dicing.